Off-grid homestead life is great, except for when it's not. It's easy, except for when it's hard. And it may not be exactly what you picture it in your mind when you think of the off-grid life. So today in this video, I am just going to share 3 things that you need to know before you embark on living on the off-grid homestead that I wish I would have known. We've lived on our off-grid homestead for about 6 years now and counting, and we have learned a few things along the way. Some things we'd like to share, some things we would repeat, some things we would choose not to repeat. And over the next few videos, I'm going to be sharing things that we wish we had known, different aspects of the off-grid life, and I hope that this will help you as you think about going off-grid or refining your off-grid journey. Or maybe you just need to know that you're not alone, like sometimes I need to know. So join me. As the hurricane is moving through our area, we're getting lots of rainfall, and the forecasters are saying that many people are going to be losing power. And so I thought this was a good time to address living off-grid. We've been living off-grid for over 6 years. 5.5 years of that we spent living in our camper. It started out with 5 people in a small camper with lots of cats. And so we have a good bit of experience to pull from. And I just wanted to share with you a few things that we've learned along the way. So this video, I'm going to be talking about 3 annoying things that they will not tell you about living off-grid. I find that the off-grid life is a good life, but it does have a few challenges that you don't encounter in regular standard life. And so let's just dive into that, and you can let me know in the comments if there are other things that you've experienced, if you are off-grid, or if you just have heard things, we can address those. Just let me know. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is very real to us right now. We have stormy skies, we have clouds for at least the next week. And so the first item that is kind of annoying, but just part of the off-grid life, at least for us on solar, is that you'll frame your day and your week around the weather. A lot of times we have so many tasks that we need to get done, like an endless list of tasks, but we have to put those tasks on hold sometimes just because we don't have the power stored in order to run like heavy equipment, heavy power tools. We basically frame what we're going to do in the day and the week by the sun, clouds, battery health, and that's because we're on solar. So you'll plan your week around the forecast, not necessarily around your tasks. And an example of that is the power tools that we run. We're still in construction. We're building our off-grid cabin. We're doing it on the slow game because we're doing it mostly ourselves, all DIY projects that we're learning. So today, for instance, we're on backup power. We have solar power, and that power, the sun powers, the sun collects on the solar panels, and then it stores in our batteries. And we have really good battery system as far as what we could afford, and we are thinking about some upgrades in the near future, but it's a pretty good system, but it does have its limits. And so on a day like this, this is at least our 3rd cloudy day, we had the solar power stored in the batteries, but we are running low because we are having days and days of cloudy weather. So we do have a backup. We have the solar that powers the batteries, and then we have a generator that we can use to also power the batteries in a pinch. But we really don't like to run the generator if we don't need to, because that uses gas, and we prefer to have it all passive. We don't always get that choice, and we're just super glad for the backup. So if we want to run the power tools like we have been today, we've been running a tile saw and some other things like other table saws and stuff. Well, we had to turn on the backup generator to power the batteries just to make sure we had enough power. And also today, like I wanted to make some cornbread. We had soup and cornbread on a rainy day. Well, I have a small countertop oven that does use electric, and we got that for use in the summer because we didn't want to run the gas stove. I have a vintage stove, and it was heating up the house too much. So we got a small countertop one, but it does run off electric. And so we are always just checking, do we have enough power stored to run these things, whether big or small, because every little thing counts. And so, yes, I save my laundry for a sunny day. I save my major cooking, if it's going to be with electricity, for a sunny day. And we just put those tasks off for later if we don't have enough power, or we'd run the generator more and use up more gas. So the first item being framing your day by the weather is one thing that you have to get used to, or you're going to have a rough time. Okay, number 2 is you will do this largely alone. I'm not saying like alone as me only alone, but alone as a family. Sometimes though, alone as an individual. And I like to, in my channel, point out the things that really affect especially the off-grid homestead, but mostly the off-grid woman on the homestead, because that's what I am. That's where I can pull from experience. And that's where some of you will find yourselves home by yourselves. And sometimes it's nice to know these things. So I think it's really good to make a tribe, and you can make a collection of people online who are going through things similar to you if you have the power to be online. And I assume that if you're online now, you're watching me online. But even though you have other people, like for instance, I have other people living the off-grid life, but I only know a couple right now who are actually doing it that I personally know. I can think of maybe two couples right now that I know for sure who are living completely off-grid. And so when you have a hard day, when you have something that you would just like to share and have somebody to be able to relate to that, it's kind of hard to find that sometimes. And so most people just won't understand, and they'll try to understand, but it's hard to relate to something that you haven't gone through. And living off grid is something that not everyone has gone through. And honestly, the TV will portray a pretty romantic version of the off-grid life. You know, we have Little House on the Prairie, and they, you know, just pump the water and they're washing the clothes, and it looks so nice because it's done in whatever 30 minutes or an hour, and nobody, you know, it's just it's a nice sanitized version of life as it used to be, but it can be a hard life. So it's not always just the hippie 1960s peace and love off-grid vibe that they try to portray. Sometimes it is that way, but sometimes it's not. And I will be honest with you, as an off-grid woman, sometimes it would be nice to have somebody to talk to, just to say, I'm so frustrated that our solar batteries aren't charged, or whatever, I need to do this task again. And largely, you will not have somebody who you can really talk to. So you're going to have to learn to kind of just be at peace with that. Hopefully reach out and find somebody, but it may be your family. Your family might be the only ones who can really relate to the particular trials that you're going through. And if we're being honest, you'll go through some trials. There'll be some frustrations. It's just part of the life of living off grid. Okay, number 3 is the one that I'm going to go into the most detail on. Living off grid entails a lot of projects. At least for us, it has included lots of DIY projects, setting up the homestead, figuring out the off-grid life and the particulars. My husband understands the details of the solar and the electric and the inverters and all that stuff much better than I do. I make it a point to learn as much as I can so that I can function and so that I can make the things work. But I don't feel like I need to know every detail because it just kind of jumbles up my brain. But the projects are ongoing. They're not really going to end. And I think the different part of living off grid versus being on the grid is that you'll just put in more brain power to make simple things happen than most people would understand. You're going to be constantly refining, improving, thinking of new ways, learning things that other people have done that you haven't thought of, because there are so many ways to live off grid. It does not all look the same. Not everyone's going to look like Grizzly Adams. Met some people who live off grid, and of the couples that we know, they don't look at all like us. Like, their homestead does not look at all like ours. And then the other couple who's just getting their homestead going as well, they are having similar frustrations that we have experienced, especially early on. And I can really relate to the lack of water and the hard work to just get the water, and things that are part of the off-grid life that people may not really think of if they have not lived it. I'll be honest with you, before we lived off-grid, I never really thought about doing laundry. Here, we're not going to the laundromat, but I have to think of many, many steps before I even throw one load of laundry in my washer. Because if all these steps are not in place, then I'm going to be stuck, and I'm going to be either having wet clothes or frustration. Before, I would just throw the clothes in. When they were done, you throw them in the dryer, fold them, and you're done. And within a couple of hours, you have your laundry done. A load of laundry here, I have to think of, first, do I have enough water? Do I have enough water in our tanks up the hill? We do have a solar water pump, and it goes, we have 2 panels that power the pump, and it works really well. It pumps water up to our holding tank, which is on the hill, and then it gravity feeds down into our house. And it's a good system, but we have to just think it through in order to make things happen. So, do I have enough water in the tanks? And so if not, then I need to pump it. I need to turn on the solar pump, and that would include, do I have enough solar? Is the sun shining so that I can power my pump to pump the water up the hill? If the sun is not shining, then I'm probably not going to be doing laundry that day, but in a pinch, I could turn on the inverter if I have enough battery power. So I either have to have solar power or battery power in order to get water up the hill. Then, if I have enough water, I have to consider, again, do I have enough battery power to run the full load? Because my washer pulls a lot of energy, and so I'm not going to do laundry if our battery power is low. That's just going to be a recipe for disaster. So usually, like I said, usually you're going to wash laundry on a sunny day, and that's not because I'm outside on a scrub board. It's just because I need the power to run my washer. So, okay, for instance, at the beginning of this week, and I didn't know, I guess I wasn't paying attention to the news. I didn't know that we were going to have like all this rain coming for a solid week or more of cloudy days. So I did some laundry at the beginning of the week, but I should have done more. I just didn't realize it was coming. And so because we are going to have clouds for a while, I've just resolved it in my mind that we're probably not going to be doing much laundry, and we're just going to have to be careful with our clothing. Okay, so that's this week. But let's just say that I've washed my clothes and I have them wet now. We've had adequate power. Then I have to consider, how am I going to dry them? And so I have to think about this before I even put them in the washer, because if it's raining like it is outside, I'm not going to hang them on the clothesline. And that is my preferred way to dry our clothes, because you don't have to use any power. The sun and the wind, they dry them pretty well, and it's kind of relaxing to hang them out. But let's just say we have this weather, that's not going to happen. Or if it's damp, we have damp winters up here in East Tennessee, upper East Tennessee, and so there's no hanging clothes out. And so we have a backup inside. We have a gas dryer that we can use to dry our clothing, and so we use that a lot in the winter. But then again, we have to make sure we have adequate power to run the gas dryer, because it does take some electricity. So there's lots of things, and I've tried to give you a little picture of what we think through in order to do simple things. So that's one peek into life here, things that we have to consider that most people aren't really going to consider when they're not off grid. My point was to tell you 3 annoying things. I told you the 3 annoying things, and that is, you'll frame your day by the weather, you'll do it alone largely, and the projects never end, and you'll put a lot of brain power into doing your projects. Living off grid is a good life, and there are really good parts of it that we like. The part that we like the most is the freedom and knowing that we're largely self-sustaining, and that's a good feeling. So many times people are curious as to what it's like living off-grid, and so that's what I'm trying to show you here. I'll be honest with you, before we lived off-grid, before we even knew that we were going to be living off-grid, I would hear about people who live off the grid, and sometimes we would talk about like doing an off-grid weekend, and that just completely intimidated me. For one, the kids were younger, and I just didn't know how I would do it. I felt like I was a little bit scared, and it's not like I felt like it wasn't possible, because we've been camping many times, and you're completely off the grid when you go camping. I've lived in the Amazon. I've lived in remote, far removed jungle villages. And so, I mean, and that was a completely off-grid life. I've lived on a boat floating up and down the Amazon, and we did not have power. So it's not that I didn't think that I could do it. It's just that I didn't know how I would do it with a family in long term. I want to leave you with this. Living off-grid is truly wild and wonderful, but I want you to know that you're going to be embarking on a journey that is very different from the world at large. So I want you to be prepared in all the ways that you can before you fully pull the plug. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so that you can continue getting more off-grid experience and updates. We've lived off-grid for 6 years, and we've done the camper life, and we've just done a lot of things that kind of give us a little bit of background for showing you what it might look like in case you want to take this journey. And we haven't done all of it, but we've done a lot, and we're super happy to share the things that we've learned along the way to make your journey a little bit easier.